Good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I will do my best to behave myself. When I love that where she said it's all my supposition and not hers. But anyhow, this is a great lecture. You need a business plan when you start out, but it's a living document and it changes throughout the life of your business. And every time you need to get a business loan, you're going to have to update it, but it's good to update it too every, I don't know, 12 to 18 months, 24 months at the max, because a lot of times your customers will define what your business is. You may think that you have a sandwich shop, but what you really see that flies off the shelf are all the bakery items. So you might turn into a bakery and forget about the sandwiches. So let's go on. My contact information is also at the end of the slideshow, and the slides are posted, and all the handouts are posted for you. So this is me. I'm mostly retired now, but I still do some consulting. And my business morphed. Originally, it was advertising and sales promotion materials, but now it's small business consulting. So businesses do change over time. A business, first of all, I also want to point out that a good thing to start with is the business model generation. It's a handout that's also included in the packet, and it was designed by Alexander Osterwilder, and he has a book called The Business Model Generation. Do not buy the book. Go to the library. You're an entrepreneur now. You have to save money. And most of all, don't get the ebook, because the first sentence in the ebook is, "This book is better as a book." I made that mistake. So do not buy the ebook. But it's a one-page template that helps you organize your thoughts. And I think it sort of simplifies writing the business plan. So that's something that you might want to look at first, but you can get it at the library. So a business plan is a written document, and it clearly defines the goals of a startup or an existing business. Like I said, you could be 5 years into the business and you need a loan from the SBA or a bank, and you're going to have to update your business plan. It outlines specific methods for achieving these goals. So it really is your roadmap to success. And what's included? These are the key areas of a business plan: an executive summary, a business description, product and here we talk about product or service, they're interchangeable. So whether you're opening up a dry cleaner or that sandwich shop, or you're making a better mousetrap. I'm just going to take a sip of water because I'm a little hoarse. It includes, it doesn't matter when we refer to product or business in this lecture, service or product, it's the same thing. And then there's a marketing plan, an operations plan, and a financial plan. So those are the major parts. And even though the executive summary comes first, write it last. Just put a page in the business plan that says executive summary and leave it blank, because it's much easier to write a concise executive summary that's 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs that includes all the information about your product or your service, or the description of the business, or the target market description, or your overall goals and objectives for your business. If you do it at the end, because you learn so much about your business. So I strongly recommend that you write it at the end. And it's also important that your business is unique. And we're going to talk a lot about your unique selling proposition. And a lot of times when you're inventing an app or something, what makes your business unique is that you're the first to market. You were the first one to do, a Groupon type of thing, or you're the first one to do Park Hero until you get knocked off, because a lot of these things are not proprietary and they can be copied and improved and made slightly different. But the unique selling proposition can also be that you're the only one in the neighborhood. So if the neighborhood doesn't have a dry cleaner, it doesn't, like if you go where they're developing Finkel's, that was the ironworks. If there's no, when they finish building the buildings, if there's no dry cleaner in that neighborhood, that can be your unique selling proposition, that none exists. So it doesn't have to be something really high tech. I mean, it can be, and it's good if it is, if it's really disruptive and it really changes. Think of how many apps we use today routinely that didn't exist 10, 15, 20 years ago. But sometimes the uniqueness is just that you're the only one there, or you're the first one in the neighborhood. So it doesn't have to be something as high concept as inventing a spot hero. And the next thing you describe is the business in detail. And you describe the business name and location. And we'll talk more about location later. Sometimes the location doesn't matter. If you always go to the customer, then it can be in the den or the basement of your house. But the business name, the legal structure, we'll talk more about that later too. Are you a sole proprietor? Are you a simple partnership? Are you an LLC? Are you a subchapter S? Are you a C Corp? So the legal structure of the business, what makes your business unique? Again, why people will come to your store or service or website, and describe why your business will succeed. So, and I looked at the number yesterday of sales that Etsy has, and there was about 9 categories: jewelry, home, personal items, 9 different. It was millions and millions of transactions, and it was in a year. So a lot of times you can do the business out of your basement, but be careful and follow all the guidelines for the city of Chicago. You cannot disrupt the neighborhood, but that's a different lecture. And then also include why your business will succeed. And, it could be that you're the first to market, or you're the only one in the neighborhood, or that you really do make a better mousetrap. What is your product or service? And this you describe in detail. What it is you're selling. Are you selling a service? Are you lawn care? By the way, if you are thinking of lawn care, there are actually 5 seasons. There's summer, fall, winter, spring, and Christmas. And in Christmas, it's one that really I've helped a lot of landscapers with, because they didn't understand that they had all the equipment to put up decorations for a household and then take them down. So, really think about what your product or service is, and summarize the key technology concept or the strategy on which your business is based. Is it something unique? Will there was TileMate, and then Apple came out with the AirTag so that you can put something on your keychain and you can always find where it is in the house or the office. So think about if there's some key technology, and that should be included in your product and service description. And then what features and benefits does your product or service have? And for this, I like to say, describe them with FAB. FAB stands for feature, F, A, advantage, B, benefit. So what features does your product have that makes it a benefit for the consumer? Because every time you're opening up a business, it should be to solve a pain point for the customer, for the target audience. So with the dry cleaner, if there's none in the neighborhood, they don't have to take their dry cleaning items to the office and drop them off somewhere near the office and then have to take them home on the L or the bus. They can drop them off on a weekend right next to where they live. So think about the features, the advantages, and the benefits. And then we talked about this, how does your business solve the customer's problem or needs uniquely? And that's what we talk about, the unique selling proposition. It's called USP, unique selling proposition. And why would a customer buy from your business? Is it that you have convenient hours? You're right there in the neighborhood. You have a wide variety of products. They say a grocery store, I think, has like 120,000 or more different items in a grocery store. And yet the premise behind Trader Joe's and Aldi's is the 80-20 rule, that you get 80% of your sales from 20% of the typical items sold in a similar store. So that's the 80-20 rule. And that's their unique, you can get in and out of a Trader Joe's or an Aldi's pretty quickly because they don't have everything, but they have enough stuff that if you need to make a quick stop to get in and out to get something for dinner or something, a specialty item, you can do it. So describe why a customer would buy from your business. And sometimes it's that you have easy credit terms, you have ample parking. Like a lot of things can make you unique, especially like when you're in neighborhoods where parking is so hard to come by in the city. Define in detail your target audience. And when somebody says, oh, my product or services appeals to everybody, I want to throttle them. Because if you define who your target audience is, and that's the customer who's most likely to buy your product or service, and who is going to be your heaviest user. So if you are making, and you also have to think about who's buying it and who's using it. And that's very, very important. And one of the things that I have given you in the handouts is a competitive analysis, because you have to analyze your direct competitors, but also your indirect or alternative competitors. So you could say that Coca-Cola's direct competitive is Pepsi. Could be RC Cola, private label, soda pop in the grocery store, but those are direct competitors to Coca-Cola. I personally am a Coca-Cola girl. I will drink Pepsi in the restaurant, but if I'm buying it, I'm buying Coke products. So it's direct competition, but indirect competition is also milk, juice, water. So you have to really think about what else will quench your thirst. There's energy drinks now. There's ice knockoffs. There's Red Bull. There's all sorts of things that are indirect competitors. So you have to think about all those things when you're analyzing your competition. Also, especially if it's a product that's going to go in a grocery store or a quick mart. Also, what's your positioning of your product? And positioning means good, better, best. Are you the most expensive? Are you the Lexus or the Cadillac? Or are you the better? Are you the Buick? Or are you good and your simple transportation and your the Toyota, and not Camry, the one below the Camry, you're just a car. You get people from point A to point B. So a Corolla, that's what I'm thinking of. So are you just a Corolla, or are you the Cadillac or the Buick? So you have to think about good, better, best, because your pricing will reflect it. And you don't always price to what the product costs you to manufacture. Think about perfume. In perfume, the most expensive thing is the bottle. The ingredients are not that costly. And somebody once told me, I think that a bottle of vodka costs, the inside part of the bottle of vodka, the vodka itself, costs about 17 cents to produce. And the bottle itself costs more than the vodka. So you really have to think about good, better, best, because think of how much money they get for Grey Goose. Or I don't drink vodka, so I don't know other brands. But, when I was growing up, there was just Smirnoffs. And I assume it's a good enough vodka. Vodka, by virtue of what it is, it has to have the same formula, the same way that champagne has to be grown in the Champagne region of France to be called champagne. So think about your indirect and direct competitors, as well as how you're going to price your product. And like I said, Grey Goose costs way more than even a huge, 10 times the 17 cents that it costs to probably make it. Define your packaging. Packaging can actually make the product and put it on the map. Think about Dean's Milk Chug. Now, Dean is a Chicago company. It's fallen on some tough times, but when I was growing up, milk only came in little wax cartons. Sometimes today you can still find wax cartons that they use for heavy whipping cream. But for the most part, they use bottles that look like, were fashioned after Coca-Cola bottles. And the reason that Dean's Milk Chug revolutionized the way milk was sold was because it fit the cup holder in the car. So if mom was taking kids hither, thither, and yon to after-school activities and sports and play dates, she could pack a snack and give a child milk instead of giving them, a sugary soda pop. So, but there's cup of soup. There's all those things that Kraft makes that you can microwave and eat right out of the container. Their mac and cheese, and there's Campbell's soups that way. There's all sorts of things. Tide Pods. And then they had to put safety packaging on the container of Tide Pods so the kids didn't get into it. But, Tide Pods are so easy, and dishwasher pods. They're incredibly easy to use. You just pop one in the, instead of measuring and filling out. So you really have to think about the product packaging and how it enhances the product. And if it's important to the product, if you're hand making items that you sell on Etsy, if you're making jewelry, you might need a nice gift box so people can buy your product and give it as gifts. But otherwise, you're just shipping it in craft cartons. The other thing you have to think about, are you the package? And when I'm talking about this, are you a real estate agent? If any of you have ever bought a home or a condo or leased commercial space, you notice how the real estate agent is dressed to the nines, has an impeccably clean, modern car when they pick you up to drive you to see the different homes, because they want you to think, I am the most successful real estate agent in Chicagoland or whatever suburb you're calling in from, and I am going to find you your dream home. And that's what they're communicating by being dressed to the nines and having a really deluxe car to drive you around in. I am successful. I find everybody their dream home, and I'm going to find you your dream home. Or a lot of times, think about Best Buy, where everybody wears a blue shirt so you can find out who the salespeople are in the store, or Target, where they wear a red shirt so you can find the helpers when you need information. And also think about, do you, where the business is located? Is it critical? Like I said, we redid our bedroom. I'm getting a custom bedspread made. The woman comes to the house. I don't go to her. She brings a book or two of fabrics. She has to measure the bed so that it's the right size. So, she did have an office, and they wound up giving it up during COVID because all her seamstresses kept sewing, but they kept sewing from home. And she realized she didn't need big, expensive office space. So think about, do you need a separate business location? And for many things, you do need a separate business location, but then the location is critical, and don't overlook, do you have convenient parking? Is it easy to find the store? Let's look at the next slide. This slide is a little hard to see, but if you look at that green little arrow, the green arrow is a Dunkin' Donuts, and the two cross streets are North Aurora Road and Eola in Aurora. And there's some of the busiest, backed up intersection during drive times, in Aurora. But the point is, a lot of people give up and they just pull into the Dunkin' Donuts, grab a cup of coffee, and then go out on the side, maybe, versus waiting, to cross at the intersection. So it's got a great location. You can enter from two sides, and that's important. Now, the little store that says A, that was very sad. The little store that says A was a retail clothing store. Only A is in an industrial park. And an industrial park is great if you're making widgets, or you're a lawyer or accountant and people come to you once a year to do your taxes and they know where you are and the rent is cheap. But usually industrial parks are for heavy duty industry. You're making nuts or bolts or widgets or mouse traps. It's not for retail stores because it's off the beaten path. When you choose a business location, if you actually need a storefront, think about your signage, and your signage should be dual. It should be horizontal, so you can see it, across the street if you're walking down the street. And it should also be vertical, so if you're driving, you can see it, when you're looking for a location. And in Chicago, it's pretty easy because our numbering system is so good. But when you're in the suburbs, a lot of times you cross the suburb, you cross the street and you're in a different suburb. So you really have to think about how easily can people see my storefront signage. So it should be vertical and horizontal. And also think about parking. A lot of businesses close because there is no parking. Now, if you're in a neighborhood like Lincoln Park where there's a ton of foot traffic, not so bad. But a lot of times when you're in more real neighborhoods, the Rogers Park, the West Ridge, the Old Irving Park, etc., parking can be incredibly important. So think about those things. You can work with City Hall. I don't know which department, but I'm sure BACP can tell you if you're in a city street and you want to cut out where you can have one of those signs, parking, available for 15 minutes with lights flashing, you can work with your alderman. In fact, that's an important point to make. Know your alderman, love your alderman, because signage in Chicago neighborhoods has to get approved by the alderman. So it's best you work with them first. So you're designing signs that will be approved. Either it's approved because it's put up safely, or it doesn't, it's not garish, or it's not too big. And, think about it. Like, I don't know if any of you know that Stanley's Fruit Market, but they didn't take down the Stanley sign, even though they will probably put something over whenever that property is redeveloped, because a lot of times once a sign is installed, it's grandfathered. So you couldn't do it again if you were to take it down, but if you leave it up, it's already grandfathered. So signage is very important, because in your marketing plan, you want to, also project sales and how are customers going to find you. Whoops. Oh, that's the backside of where the real clothing store was in the industrial park. How will you price your product or service? We already talked about good, better, best. Are you going to be lower than your competition, which I do not recommend, because then you can get in a contest of who goes the lowest, and none of you make money. So I don't recommend a lower than your competition. You can be on par on your competition, because if one pizza is sold for, an individual pizza for $9.95 and you want to be $9.99, or, pretty much right around there, that's okay, on par with your competition. Or you can be higher than your competition. Think of how many things that you're paying for the prestige. the little Ralph Lauren pony on your shirt, or all the other logos. I know a lot of men don't like wearing logoized items because they don't want to be advertising the brands that they're wearing. But even jeans, even Levi's are much more money today than they used to be. And you can buy store brand jeans or Walmart jeans or Target jeans for a fraction of what you're paying for the Levi's name. Now, are they as good? I don't know. Levi's have been around since 18 something or other. So think about how you price your service: lower than, on par, higher than. And how does your price compare to direct and indirect competition? If you ever notice in the grocery stores, 1 week Pepsi products are on sale, 1 week Coke products are on sale, and they have lots of, even when I think a Pepsi product is really like, because it's by the same distributor, like Canada Dry and some other really brands that you don't associate with Pepsi Cola. But think about how your price compares to the competition. And most important, can you be profitable at your chosen price? And that's really, really critical, because you're in it to make money. And even if you think about the free apps, think of how many ads you see in free apps. Yes, the app is free and it's fun. A lot of games have a free version where you see an ad every time you take a turn. I know that's how it is with Words with Friends, but I don't want to pay $10 a month to miss, to cut ads. My time, I'm semi-retired. I got the time. I'll watch the ad or just turn away from it. But so that's how all those free apps are managed. They sell advertising space. So think about, can you be profitable? And we'll talk more about profitability later on. You have a section on finance. And now, how are you, this is very important, how are you going to promote or advertise your product? Advertising is very, very costly. Now, if you can get word of mouth, if you already have a ton of followers on Facebook or Instagram, a lot of companies use Facebook very, very successfully. One of them is our own beloved Lou Malnati's. Lou Malnati's developed such a strong following on Facebook that they found that they only advertise their job openings now on Facebook, because they found that people that follow them sort of believe in the values of the family-owned and run business. And so they get a better caliber of job applicant. So it's certainly affordable to do Facebook advertising and send out messaging and have followers, and Instagram, but also think about billboards. Now, billboards are also a form of more targeted marketing because it's in the city where the billboard is. But think about WeatherTech. WeatherTech does their whole campaign. Now they're on TV, but in the early days, they were just on WBBM, AM or FM, that's news radio in Chicago, 780 or 105.9 FM. And they advertised during drive times, because that's when people were bringing slush in their car and rain and leaves and gunk. And so they advertised during drive times, and they also took out billboards on highways where in the morning you're crawling. So you can see on the Kennedy, a WeatherTech ad for several minutes because you're only going a mile, an hour because you're stuck in traffic. So think about how to reach your target audience that we spoke about. And you want, in your target audiences, you also have to think about, and I mentioned it briefly, kiddie cereals are eaten by children, but they're bought by adults. Same way with diapers and lots of other products. There once was a study done by Reader's Digest, and there was only a handful of items that men bought more and made the purchase decision than women. One of them was cars, one was home electronics, one was hard liquor, and I can't remember the other two, but this was in the 80s and it hasn't changed all that much because they found that women bought beer more often because they picked it up in the grocery store when they were shopping for groceries, even though their husbands or the men in their life might be drinking the beer, they made the purchase decision more often. And the same way for men's clothing. More women buy men's clothing than men do because men oftentimes don't like to shop or don't have the time and don't want to waste their weekend shopping. So their wives buy them underwear and clothes and shirts and stuff. So you really have to think about who's buying. The same way with insure. A lot of times it might be adult children who are buying it for a more elderly mom or dad who need extra protein and vitamins in their diet. So you have to think about who's buying it versus whom you're advertising to, because or who's using the product, because the person using it is not the one who's laying out the money to buy it. So you can use mass media, and that can be TV, billboards, national magazines, or you can use targeted media. And billboards, like I said, can also be targeted if you're only in, major cities or only in certain areas. Direct mail, that's when you get postcards from real estate agents, that they've just sold the home down the street. So if you need to sell your house, call them. Local radio like WBBM, FM, or local newspapers, the Tribune. Even in the Tribune, you can buy sections of the Tribune. You don't have to advertise throughout the city. They can sell you like quadrants of the city. Valpak still exists. You don't see it that much anymore, but that's when you used to get a bunch of ads in the mail. And then there's also regional ways to advertise where you can buy segments of national magazines, because you might only be in 2 or 3 states. You might be selling in, Illinois and also across the border in Indiana or in Illinois and also Wisconsin. So you might want to buy a section of Illinois and Wisconsin, or Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, and you can buy regional sections of magazines. There's also, these are inexpensive methods, e-newsletters, Facebook, Instagram. So and word of mouth. Word of mouth is if you have a website and people can post, why they love your product or your service, that, you're a dry cleaner, but you also do tailoring, and you remade the wedding dress from the mother for the daughter. So testimonials can be really good, and those can be on your website. And sometimes your website can be very, very simple and just explain your hours of operation and when you're going to, the days you're open and the services you provide. And it doesn't need to have a million products that you sell. Now, some stores do. ABT in Glenview, you can look at all the refrigerators, all the dishwashers. So it depends on what the business is. But think about how you're going to advertise and how you're going to drive customers into your store. And then you need to answer physical distributions questions. How are you going to get your products to where people would expect to buy them? A young lady, Maya Camille, who has Justice of the Pies, she finally has her own store on the South Side. And it's a beautiful store, but, for many years, she did catering and she sold slices of pie through Whole Foods. So you have to think about, how are customers going to find your product and how are they going to know to look for your product? So when you use distributors, now distributors, most food products use a 2-step distribution plan where you sell to a wholesaler, and the wholesaler sells to the retailer, and the retailer sells to the end user consumer. So that's how they sell ketchup, and they sell tomato sauce, and they sell all sorts of things. Those things go through a two-step distribution where they're sold to a wholesaler. Also, drug products, like in a health, in a drugstore, a Walgreens or a CVS. Do you ever notice how the stores have those big giant bins and they're putting on? That's because the drugstore doesn't want to take a case. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. The drugstore doesn't want to take a case of 24 bottles of baby shampoo. They only sold 2 this week, so they only keep 6 on the shelf, so they only want to replace 2 of them. And that's when a distribution wholesaler will, break down so that you can order 2 of these, 3 of those, 4 of those. So think about how you're going to get your products distributed, and know who your suppliers will be, and have multiple suppliers, because even though you have the best relationship with whomever you buy your flour, if you're a bakery, or your yeast, or your boxes that you sell your baked goods in, time will come when they have a flood, a fire, God knows what, and they will be shut down. And so you better have backup suppliers for all the ingredients you need to make your goods and services. It also keeps them on their toes so that your pricing is better. But when you think about Coca-Cola, think about, or a Hershey bar or Wrigley gum, think about all the places you can buy a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi. I don't think anybody in Chicagoland is ever more than 300 feet away from a Coke or a Pepsi. I mean, they sell them in, L stations and L tracks, and they're in study lounges at schools, and they're in hospital waiting rooms, and in hospital cafeterias, and in drugstores and grocery stores. In fact, the grocery store even has all the cold drinks right at the checkout. So God forbid you didn't, you don't want a warm bottle of Coke, you want a nice frosty bottle of Coke, you can get it at the checkout counter. So I really don't think you're ever that far away from a Coca-Cola. Also think about, are you going to sell online? Are you going to set up an Amazon store or an Etsy store, or, a website and sell direct to consumer? But a lot of companies have been made by selling on Amazon. Trying to think, and the name has just jumped out of my head, but a black hair care product that now is in national distribution in all the Walgreens and all the CVS stores and mass distribution. She started on just selling them on Amazon, having an Amazon store. There were specialty hair products for people with coarse curly hair. And thank God it's natural. Thank God it's natural. That's the name of the company. And she started just by selling the products online. And once she had enough online sales, which is very common today, stores before a Walgreens or a Target or a Kmart, or not a Kmart, they're out of business, but a Walmart, a Target, a CVS, etc., wants to stock your product, you have to show that you have sales. And so she could show how her sales were growing every week, every month, repeat users. And that's how she got into CVS and Target and got national distribution. So think about if you're going to start selling just on Amazon or Etsy or your own website. But definitely have multiple suppliers, because trust me, it does happen. Let's go on. Okay, now you have to think about your technology requirements. Do you need special equipment? Do you need software, internet connectivity in the shop? Think about now how many restaurants take your order on an iPad. Either the waitress or the waiter takes it on an iPad, or you put it in on an iPad on a table. I know Red Robin is that way. So think about the software you need. Do you need card readers now? Now, a lot of times, and this has been in Europe for many, many years, But in America now, the waiter or waitress will bring you that little card reader where it tells you what the bill is, and you swipe your card and you get the receipt right at the table. So what do you need? What personnel requirements do you need? Do you need part-time employees, full-time employees, contract employees, background? Are you going to do background checks, bonding? When is somebody really a contractor? We'll talk about that in a minute. But when you need part-time help, see if you can't use your teenage children. You have to check with the city, but the rules are different for, you have to be 16 to work legally in Chicagoland, but not if you're a blood relative. The rules are different. The hours are different too, that you can work if you're a child. But think about how much your kids know about the internet and web development and using Adobe and software and etc. So if you can pay your teenage child to work for you, salaries are fully deductible. Allowances are not. So think about your part-time help when you need full-time help. By the way, on the 1099 test, when is somebody a contractor? You can Google the IRS for a 1099 test, and there's a series of questions. There's either 16 or 20 questions, and it has to do with control. How much control do you have over the contractor? And if it's your accountant and your lawyer, you have very little control. You call them when you need help, they solve it, they send you a bill. The same way with your accountant. He might come to your business once a quarter, once a month to close out your books, but he sets his own time, he brings his own computer, he has his own accounting software. You really don't have any control over him. But so they test for control, financial, like you don't set the price that the accountant charges you. He tells you how much he is an hour, the type of relationship you have, and also the key aspect of the business. And that's why, like, a lot of the Uber drivers have complained and similar contract employees, because they said, we're told to wear Uber clothing. We have to have Uber or Lyft advertised in the car, so they don't have that much control if they're told what to wear and how to work and how many hours they need to work a week. So then are they really contract employees or are they employees? So you have to be very careful, because the Department of Labor, the Illinois Department of Labor, will come after you, and they charge huge fines if they find out you are paying people as contractors when they're really employees. Another example is a cleaning service. They come at night, they set their pricing. They bring their own supplies. You may have a vacuum in the office just for convenience, but otherwise they bring their own cleaning supplies and they let themselves in and lock themselves, up when they leave. Also, think about resource requirements. What other resources does the business need? Do you need a website? How complicated does the website have to be, or is it just a billboard telling your hours and the services? Do you need printed materials? Do you need leave behinds? Now there's very few leave behinds. When you used to look at a car, you used to get pictures, the brochure of the different models. Now you just get sent to Ford or GM or Toyota websites to see all the cars. So do you need physical office space or business space? Often you don't, but these are things that you have to, because so many of them have expenses. Even if you have a website and you use GoDaddy to get a website, you're paying for the host to upkeep the website. So this is all money that you're going to be paying. External requirements. Do you need an accountant, a lawyer, a cleaning service, insurance? And you do need liability insurance. You need workman's comp as soon as you have one employee. Down the road, you might want key employee insurance. So think about the external requirements that you need. Think about other resource requirements. Do you want to do cloud computing? And a lot of accountants now do want you to use the cloud version of software, because then they can just tap in and close your books remotely. Do you need Microsoft Office? Do you need QuickBooks or, Peachtree or something similar? Do you need a grasshopper.com or something similar? A grasshopper.com is where they call your office and you're not there because you're a sole proprietor, and then it automatically searches to your cell phone. And if you're not there, it searches to your house phone. But the customer doesn't see it. They just think they're calling the office number. Regis offices, our offices, shared offices. Although WeWork is on very tough times. There's 1871. There's M-Hub in Chicago. 1871 is more for like tech app types of shared office space. And M-Hub, which just outgrew its space and moved to a new, bigger space, is for people who make actual widgets. They have a lot of equipment to make prototypes so that you can get investors, etc. But that's shared office space. Do you need iPads or smartphones or GoDaddy or Namecheap as a competitor to GoDaddy? Or do you need Vistaprint to get business cards or stationery? And they make it Vistaprint was invented by an entrepreneur who didn't like that he had to pay a small printer a small fortune to get business cards. So what Vistaprint does is they print huge sheets of, many dozens of different business cards all on the same sheet. They print 500 sheets and then they just cut them out and you get your 500 and Joe the baker gets his 500 and Sally the accountant gets her 500. So Vistaprint is very affordable. And then there's Google. Everybody should get Google My Business because it's free. And that's when you Google a business and it tells you the hours they're open, the days of the week they're open. Sometimes it has a brief listing of your services. And oftentimes too, it tells you like how busy they are. I know when you look at pizza places and other restaurants, it tells you what the peak hours are. So you might decide if you're going to go a little later or a little earlier. Also think about, do you need PayPal, Stripe, Google, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay? The lady who does the custom bedspread actually wanted us to Zelle her the deposit. We said, we're seniors. It was it's not like you're Zelling $15 or $20. It was going to be a significant deposit. And we said, you know what, we'll write you a check, because we were afraid to do Zelle for that big a number. But a lot of times people do it for small amounts, and they do it because the fees are less than taking a credit card. But now a lot of stores only take credit cards because they don't want to be robbed, and there's no cash on the premises. And people know that Argo Tea only takes credit cards, or Foxtrot only takes credit cards. So, but you still need the software and the hardware. Stripe is a credit card processing system for small businesses. So think about, what kind of software you need to even process sales. Operations management. Who will be in charge of your business? Who is Mr. Outside? Who's Miss Inside? A lot of times if you have a partner, you'll have somebody who specializes in sales and somebody runs the office. So think about the skills you need to run your business. And it's okay if you turn a hobby into a business. You might have always worked in a baseball camp in the summer. You were a school teacher, but you took a summer job running a baseball camp at a big camp. Well, now you can turn that into, if you want to run your own baseball camp. So think about a hobby that you can turn into a business. What special qualifications or expertise do you have? That's where the hobby can turn into a business. Same way, if you always crochet or knit and you want to open up a storefront and give lessons on sewing, crocheting, knitting, and sell fabric, or also sell yarn. When will you need to add employees? And do you know how to add employees legally? Remember, this is Illinois. We certainly follow Title VII of the Equal Opportunity, which says you can't ask about age or genetic information. You can't ask about birthplace or country of origin or citizenship. You can ask to see, can they work in the country legally, and they have to, you know, show you documentation that they have the ability to work here, but you can't ask where they came from. You can't ask about disabilities, gender, sex, or sexual orientation. You can't ask about marital status or family or pregnancy. You can't, you know, discriminate based on race, color, ethnicity, religion. You can't ask about home ownership, you know, bankruptcy, wage garnishment. And you also, in Illinois, you cannot ask for salary history any longer. So, and the only way you can pull a credit score, there are some really defined ways that you can ask about credit, is if they handle cash or key secrets about the business. That is there's like 5 ways you can get look at a credit score, but you can only demand it if it's really germane to their job. Otherwise, you can't ask about their credit or bankruptcy history. Also, never tell an employee that there's a probational period. In your head, in your heart, you can know that there's a 30 or 90-day probational period, but don't say it out loud, because if you say it out loud, it can be considered a contract, a verbal contract. And if somebody's really a loser and you want to get rid of them after a few days or a couple of weeks, you don't want to have said that, oh, there's a 90-day probation period. So think it, but don't say it. And also think about when you need to add workman's comp. When you have your first real employee, non-family member, you need workman's comp. So there's that. And then also think, and we'll talk more about it in a minute, about if you have a partnership, because there's rules that you should think about before you really start the business. Then think about what salaries will you pay, and what training will you have to supply your employees, or will you require, what experience will you have? You know, you might want some sales experience if you're hiring them to do sales, or you might be so desperate for help that you're willing to train. But there are rules about minimum pay in Chicagoland, and it's different for the different counties of Illinois, but you have to investigate it and make sure that you're paying people appropriately. A lot of people now are paying over the minimum wage because they can't hire people. You have to think about, will you give drug tests, check backgrounds, or bond employees? You know, if you're Stanley Steamer and you're opening up, I think those are like franchises. So you're opening up a Stanley Steamer branch and you're going to have people go into other people's homes. You might want to check backgrounds and make sure that they don't have a criminal background, or that they that you have to bond your employees so that if they break something accidentally in good faith, but they break a vase or a picture frame, you know, do you have insurance if you have to replace it? You're not going to, you know, use insurance to replace a $20 picture frame. But if it was a family heirloom handmade by grandpa, you might need insurance. So think about those things. Also think about who will manage the business and the daily long-term finances. Will you, you know, are you going to use software? Are you going to keep a ledger? How will you process and record sales? Does your business have special local or federal regulations? So when we talk about recording sales, do you need a POS terminal? That's a point of sale terminal, those complicated cash registers. So like when you order at a Wendy's or a McDonald's, or now when you do it on their kiosks, you know, they're keeping track that they sold these many servings of French fries and these many Coca-Colas, and that's so they know how to manage their inventory. For some businesses, you have to do a statement of work. When you're a consultant and a client hires you for a job, you're wise to write up a statement of work, have the client read it and sign it before you begin the project, because sometimes there's project creep and the project gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so you want to say, well, that wasn't in our original project. I have to charge you more for that. And sometimes it's legitimate. They forgot to tell you that, oh, they need, and this did happen to me when I did advertising and sales promotion. It was going to be an 8-page brochure, but then they needed 4 more pages of pricing. Well, to print an 8-page brochure is way different. It's a third bigger if you have 12 pages. So you want to do a statement of work. Sometimes it's a project proposal if you're an architect and you're doing a project. So it's a project proposal. If you do work for government agencies or nonprofits, a lot of times it's called a request for proposals or a request for a project proposal. So you have to fill out the elements that they state, like the government, when they look for contractors, they have you fill out and they tell you what has to be included in the product proposal. Remember too, this is Illinois, so we tax products, but we don't tax services, although they always think about it. So if you have an auto repair shop, you charge tax on the motor oil that you're putting into the car. You do not charge tax on the labor to put the motor oil into the car. However, motor oil is a whole new problem because we have rules in Illinois about motor oil collection and recycling. The same thing, we have rules about asbestos removal, and we have rules for pulling permits. If you are doing a bathroom remodel and everything stays in the same exact location, you're putting in, you're a household remodeler and you're putting in a sink, but it's exactly where the old sink is. And don't quote me because I am not a builder, but you don't usually need a permit to just change out one fixture for another. I replaced a toilet. I didn't need a permit. However, when you do a huge remodeling and you're moving walls and you're moving pipes, you most certainly need permits in the city of Chicago and in most other places as well. Who will be in charge of inventory and inventory control measures so you don't have a lot of loss prevention? A lot of stores are getting rid of their self-checkout because they find people are not scanning all the items, or they're putting in for regular lettuce when it's organic lettuce. So, you have to, and if you're a quick mart, you have to manage food and expiration dates. You have to manage food safety and have a HACCP plan, which is a hazard analysis of critical control points, so that you're not set, if you have a restaurant, you have to keep food at a certain temperature so that you don't make people sick or give them food poisoning. So think about what management plans and operations you have to have in place. Now, this is the slide where we talk about entity, and this is, do you have a sole proprietor that's just, and when I first started my business, Rockin Enterprises was just a sole proprietor, but because I had very little risk of getting sued, my accountant asked me, what was the chance? What was my biggest liability? I said, if I had to reprint a huge project because I made a mistake. Now, I made all my clients sign off on proofs before I went to the printer, so the risk was really teensy weensy. But he said, and how much would a huge printing job cost you? At the time, I said $10,000. He said, could you cover it? I said, yes. He said, good, you're a sole proprietor, because the math was easier to take care of the books. But as the business grew and we had more business and more sales, then I switched to a subchapter S. So you can switch if you make a mistake or you decide it's not the right entity for your business. You just can't change every year, because that's a red flag to the IRS to say, ooh, audit me, audit me. So you can change, but not frequently. A partnership agreement, if you have a simple partnership, whether it's with your wife, with your best friend, with your brother or brother-in-law or sister-in-law, have a partnership agreement in place before you start the business, and always include that you will use a third-party arbitrator if you can't agree. Because if it's a simple partnership and there's 2 of you, you each have a 50-50 vote. If there's 3 of you, if you're 3 brothers and you form a business, it can be two brothers against one, but it's still a good idea to have a partnership agreement because it should also include a buy-sell agreement. You love your partner, their spouse, not so much. Your partner dies in an accident. You want to know how you can buy the spouse out before the poor soul dies. So make sure you have a buy-sell agreement. What insurances do you need? General liability, that's when you put the key in the door and start selling, you need general liability. Workman's comp, when you have your first outside employee. Errors and omissions, those are usually for professional businesses like attorneys or architects or builders, so that if you make a mistake and it is your fault, you have errors and omissions insurance. And key employee is when the business is bigger. Say it's two people and the one who does the outside selling really is worth so much more than the one who does, the inside, the bookkeeping, the office management. You might want key employee insurance on the seller. And what that does is it gives you enough money to hire a contractor and to hire a headhunter till you can replace that person. And then another big mistake is underestimating startup costs. And I've added one more, estimating the length of the sales cycle, because the sales cycle is much longer usually than you think it is, so it takes 2 or 3 times more money to start up, and it takes 2 or 3 times longer to start getting your sales, especially if you're selling something complex where they have to say, or it's expensive, software to run a business, and they have to consider it and get all sorts of approvals. So think about those things. Financial planning. Have you prepared a break-even analysis? And do you even know what break-even is? Break-even, and there is a template for break-even, and all the formula are in the Excel sheet. So save that as the master when Stella posts it, and then you can change it, as you need to, because a break-even is when total costs equal total revenue. So you're not making money, but you're not bleeding cash. Exactly what you spend to produce the good or service and exactly what you're selling, they're identical. So you're not making money, but you're not. And it's very customary for a new business to lose money for the first several months till you start getting traction. So the goal is to get to break even. And also when you look at break even, you should look at it, because sometimes the amount changes, especially if you have a cost of goods sold and you're selling more widgets. So look at break even for a good month and a bad month, because lots of things have seasonality. Almost everything has seasonality. So a lot of businesses make all their money between September and December 31st. So after Labor Day, if you think about, or even now, maybe a little creep into August, when they sell computers to go back to school, et cetera, and all those things you need for back to school, and then home electronics for Christmas gifts, et cetera. So think about, the seasonality of your good or service. Also what your initial sales are going to be and what your monthly cash flow is. And there is a cash flow template also. All the formula are in place. I've given it to Stella. She will post it. But think about, really when expenses hit, because sometimes you pay insurance quarterly. Maybe you can't afford to pay it quarterly and you have to pay a little more service fee, but you have to pay it monthly because it helps with your cash flow. I thought it was interesting. We went to Scotland. So Scotland is noted for its whiskey and how it's aged in barrels, and they have 12-year, aged and 20-year aged and and then some of the best gin comes from Scotland, because with gin, you can make it in the bathtub and put it in a bottle and sell it immediately. Gin is not aged at all. So they started making gin, these really famous whiskey companies, because it doesn't have to be aged. So you can sell gin all the time, where the whiskey had to be aged and was a big, long process. So think about that. We're finishing up. Does your business have special seasonality? Most do. candy, the bulk of candy made that you sell for Halloween that shows up right after Labor Day is made in spring and summer so that it can be shipped and be in the store. So it's there right the day after Labor Day. Televisions in fall, we said laptop computers, tax refunds. A lot of people buy home electronics when they get their tax refund, or appliances in, in the new year when they get their money back, or they want a new TV for Super Bowl Sunday. So think about seasonality. Swimsuits, we already talked about landscaping in the 5 seasons that they have. And how much will it cost to open or you expand your business? And remember, it takes usually much, much more money than you anticipate. So don't, if you're looking for investors, don't make everything on the cheap, because odds are you will not be able to, it costs more money. There's delays, there's expenses. What are your personal financial monthly expenses? How much do you need to keep a roof over your head and food on the table and insurance covered? And there's nothing wrong with starting your business and you taking a more meaningful job just so you don't go into debt. I was once very impressed where somebody I was mentoring took a job and then was promoted to manager. And he really was like an engineer, but he took a job at a dollar store just to keep, not to spend his money on developing the business and not to spend it on rent and food, et cetera, and car expenses. So there's nothing wrong with taking a menial job, no matter what your profession really is, to keep your head above water. Do you have a nest egg? Do you have a working spouse? How much money can you invest? And is there support from other family members? But I really say try not to take money, because it makes Thanksgiving and Christmas really awful. So try not to take money from other family members. Do you want to do crowdfunding? Do you want to use Kickstarter or Indiegogo or GoFundMe? When I Googled crowdfunding, there were actually dozens of websites for crowdfunding, but really the only 3 I ever heard of were Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and GoFundMe. There also is equity crowdfunding in Illinois, but it's never really taken off. And that's where a community can buy shares in your business and then you sort of buy them back from them. But it's a way to raise capital. Like if they want another pizza parlor in their neighborhood, you can look it up. It's called equity crowdfunding. And then, do you have collateral for a traditional bank loan? Can you get financing terms from your vendors? And this is when you buy something from your vendors, raw materials, but instead of paying in 30 days, you ask them, can I pay in 45 days or 60 days? That way you're using their money while you make the widgets, assemble them and sell them. Because you can make them and sell them in 30 days, but you're not paying for the raw materials for 60 days. Also a factor, if you make stuff that's sold at retail and you have premier clients, like you sell to Macy's or Target or Walmart or Jewel or Mariano's, a lot of times you can use factors. And a factor is where you give them a purchase order and they give you maybe 95 cents or 93 cents on the dollar. And then they bill the buyer, the retail store, the Mariano's or the Jewel or the Macy's for the amount. And then sometimes if they collect really quickly, they even give you a penny or 2 back. But it means that your customer is so, worthy that they will lend you the money. And then they make their money on the spread between how much they give you and what they collect from Macy's. Can you get a cosigner for a loan? Do you know your credit score? And this is a real free credit score. You don't have to pay for them now. But now many companies have free credit scores with their credit card. Discover does, Chase does, Citibank does. So I'm sure all the major credit cards do. You just have to make sure you have, with Chase, it's Chase Slate. With Citi, I don't know, I know the Costco one gives us a credit score. But if you want a free one, this is unscored, but at least you can see what people are reading about you before you don't go for a loan capriciously, because they all pull your credit score. And every time somebody looks at your credit score, it goes down by 5 points. And then you're also going to need to know how will loan proceeds be applied? So if you are asking for a loan in your business plan, you want to say, I'm asking for a $50,000 loan. $20,000 will go for raw materials, $30,000 is going to go for staff, etc. Credit scores generally raise from 300 to 850, but there are a few specialty ones. Car dealers have scores they look at that go up to 900. SMART goals. You want goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time related. So, include goals in your business plan. You should have 1-year goal and 3-year goal. And it can be measurable. They can be sales objectives, market share, revenue, profitability, but they must be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant or realistic to the business, and time-based. And that's me. So I did finish a few minutes late, but I hope you got a lot of information. And now I am more than happy to take questions. Stella, are you there? Hello. I can see the, oh, there's lots of questions. Whoops,
do you want to start? Do you want to start in the chat or the Q&A box?
Wherever the Q&As are, wherever,
Yes, this presentation will be available via YouTube. You'll go to youtube.com/Chicago BACP.
Oh, the book I suggested, okay, is called The Business Model Generation. And it's by Alex Osterwalder, which is a mouthful. It's Osterwalder, but it's The Business Model Generation. So. Oh, yeah, and they printed it. That's it. And then I mean, the legalities is just if you have I'm looking at the one about why not tell them that there's a probationary period. They might, if they're really a stinky employee and they might know how to play the game, they might say that you gave them a verbal contract because you said, well, the probationary period is 90 days, but you want to get rid of them after 2 weeks. So that's why I don't recommend saying it. You can think it, but not say it. But I'm not an attorney, ask your lawyer, but it is at will, but sometimes they can say that it's an implied contract. Stella will post the financial planning templates, the cash flow, and the break even. There is bookkeeping software, QuickBooks, or there's several others. QuickBooks is probably the most famous. Comprehensive. You don't need, or I'm looking at the question, what about the software and stuff? You should say, especially if you're going to, because it's your roadmap, if you're going to need to buy Microsoft Office, if you're going to need to get terminals that link to Stripe, you should, because they have costs associated, you should think about it at least enough to cover what expenses you're going to have, for your startup, but you don't have to buy them, until you actually open the doors and start needing them. Oh, I'm glad that this one about projecting sales, that is a brilliant question, and I apologize for not mentioning this. sometimes it is really hard to project what sales are going to be, but you know what your costs are going to be pretty much. You know what the rent's going to be. You know what the cell phone service is going to be. You know what mailing expense or printing or web hosting expenses. So fill out the expense part first on the cash flow projections that I gave the template to. All the math is in place, so save the first one as the master. Then you can sort of back into sales, and don't be afraid to show that for the first 6 months or 3 months or 4 months, you are in the red. Your sales do not exceed expenses, because that's more realistic to a buyer, to a banker rather, than seeing pie in the sky. So, you know, and then also you can equate with how many sales at the average ticket price do you need to make per hour, you know, per hour, to see if it's a realistic amount. If it's not realistic, change it, like I said, because you're better to show that you're operating in the red than, you know, pie in the sky. But like, and sometimes, you know, if you're working out of your house and you're making crafts, you might get to break even quicker than you think. Oh, how long does the business play? That's a great question too. As long as it needs to be. It doesn't have to be. Some people do. Oh my God, when I used to have to read business plans, because I worked for nonprofits where we gave business loans, I wanted to pull my hair out when they were 50-page plans and they were just so repetitive. It was awful. They have to be. There is a template that asks all the questions that I've given to Stella. If you answer the questions in complete sentences, you wind up with a business plan. Sometimes if you want to show pictures of each different item, which is called a stock keeping unit, you know, say you're selling sweaters, jeans, and socks. It's all you're selling in the store. Look at like Lululemon, they don't sell that many items. You know, you might have a page showing pictures of what you're selling or planning to sell, and that might beef up the business plan, but you don't have to make it bigger than answering the questions in that template that I gave. So if it's 6 pages, 9 pages, however long it takes you to describe what you're doing and where you're doing it and how you're doing it, it's long enough. It does not have to be some ridiculous length. So the templates are going to be posted with, okay, so the templates are going to be posted where, I guess on YouTube, or she sends them to you after you register. Stella, do you want to answer?
Yep. This webinar, this exact webinar will be available on youtube.com/Chicago BACP. Again, it's youtube.com/Chicago BACP.
Okay. Was there any question I didn't answer?
No, I was following along.
All right.
We have a lot of thank yous.
Well, they're quite welcome. It's my pleasure. It's always a good group. And like I said, you can write me if you have a specific question. If I don't answer in 2 days, write again, because, you know, I'm semi-retired. Sometimes I miss an email. But, you know, I'm happy to help.
If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program and would like to receive credit for today's webinar, please log on to chicago.gov/BACP certificate. Again, that's chicago.gov/BACP certificate. To learn more about our upcoming webinars, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Again, that's chicago.gov/business education. And thank you to Donna for today's presentation. And I hope that everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.